When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
This is The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. If I had to guess, you weren't a runner in high school. Or if you were, that was a really long time ago and you returned to running later in life. Most of the runners I coach today didn't run track or cross country as kids, but they found running as adults for a lot of different reasons. We are more likely to be parents of kids who run than high school runners ourselves. My own 13-year-old daughter runs cross country and track, and not because I told her to. She found it on her own, mainly because her friends were doing it. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not even sure I understand the scoring system exactly in cross country, but I am learning. The one thing I do know is that training kids is a lot different than coaching adults. They are not just mini versions of us, so the way they train has to look different. But in a lot of ways, there still are a lot more things their ideal training has in common with ours that you might just be surprised about. And you might just learn a few new things to incorporate into your own training. Like what? Let's find out. Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and my mission is to help you improve your running, your mindset, and your life with science-backed training and plant-based nutrition. Today, I'm talking with one of the most prominent coach of coaches in America, Jay Johnson. You'll learn about the differences between training adults and high school kids, what parents need to know about high school coaches, and what all runners, regardless of age, should be doing besides just running, and why. Jay's got a lot of resources that we talk about in this episode, which are all linked in our show notes, so be sure to check those out after you listen. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned all the way to the end of the episode for another Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. And now, my conversation with Jay Johnson. Welcome to The Planted Runner, Jay.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Claire. Thank you.
I've been trying to get you on this show for a long time. I have heard about you so many years ago with the lunge matrix, and we're going to get into that part in a little bit. But I first want to talk about what you're doing today. So you help high school kids who are in track and cross country, and you also coach coaches. So I wanted to go into what makes a good high school coach. I'm sure a lot of people listening today might have kids in high school or junior high. How do we know as parents we got a good coach on our hands?
Yeah, and first, I'm so excited to be here, and it will be fun to talk about things like the lunge matrix and whatnot. And actually, I guess that actually that's part of what we would talk about here, which is, in 2024, coaching at the high school level at a high level is going to require a lot more than it did when I was an athlete in the 1990s, where it was just this idea of, hey, we're going to build a base. And I always joke about this when I'm writing about it, like we're doing some half-hearted static stretching, and then we're going for a run, and then we come back and do some half-hearted static stretching for like 2 minutes, and then we go home. And so, to your question about what a good high school coach, like what we're looking for, and I can talk about some things about, you obviously they need to communicate well and care about kids, but let's just dive right into training for a moment, which is we expect some sort of dynamic warm up to start practice. So we would expect the lunge matrix and leg swings. And there's actually a warm up, and maybe we can link to it in the show notes, that I like better. It's for free on YouTube. So it's a dynamic warm up. It takes exactly 13 minutes once you learn it. So that's interesting right there, because it's a commitment on the coach's part to say, hey, we maybe only have 90 minutes to practice. We're going to take 13 of it to warm up in the right way. I do think every program is doing some sort of strides, and this is maybe different than what some of your listeners do in their own running. And just a little nudge, they should be doing strides.
Yes, all of mine do.
Okay, awesome. So they've already heard that message. For a kid who's running 5,000 meters at this time of year at the end of the cross country season, they should have been running strides much faster, going all the way back to August, right? They should have been doing strides at 1,600 and 800 pace. And if it comes back to what does a good high school coach do, they understand that we want 5K pace to feel really easy. And then you go back to what do we do in June? We started doing our strides at 5K pace in June. By August, we're getting comfortable at mile pace, at 800 pace. And then now in the championship season, kids can quote kick at the end of the race in a really good way, because they've been touching on those paces all year long. And then finally, we go into the post-run work. And some people might know Myrtle, the Myrtle routine. Myrtle's getting pretty old now in 2024.
Tell people what it is. What it is.
So Myrtle is a routine. If you go back to kind of where I was in coaching, I was a junior college coach in Kansas, and I met a coach who was coaching at Kansas State, and his name is Mike Smith. Then I went and coached at the University of Colorado for 6 years, where I had run. And so many people were getting hurt. I got hurt a decent amount in college, not a crazy amount, but enough to know that had I been able to be consistent in my training, I would have raced a lot faster. And I think that story is something we can all we can relate to it, whether we're missing training for a week or we're missing it for months and months. And so the idea is, and this is where this analogy I think will be helpful. It's like, we've got this car, we've got the aerobic engine. We do our long runs, we do our fartlek runs, our threshold runs, but we have to strengthen the chassis. And so the question was, how are we going to strengthen the chassis? And that's where I learned from my friend at Kansas State, Mike Smith. He had all these ways. Now, some of them were in the weight room, and some of them might have been, quote, core strength, but a lot of it that I hadn't seen before were things that were taken from the world of physical therapy, things that are, we're talking about hip mobility. We're talking about hip strength. We're talking about some exercises that looked a little funny if you're doing them. Now, Claire, this is where I'm the weirdo. I didn't think they were weird to do them. So I basically took what I thought were some of his best exercises, put them together in a routine. The reason it was called Myrtle is it focused on the hip girdle. So we're looking front of the body, anterior. We're looking at back of the body, posterior. And then we're looking at moving in all three planes of motion. And again, all this works together, right? Lunge, matrix, leg swings, doing all the Myrtle routine. But I have a lot of people saying, hey, I do Myrtle at the end of every run. And that's something that would have been really useful. My daughter's 16, so born in 2008. And right around 2008, I was already moving into, hey, Myrtle isn't enough. It's a 5-minute routine. And if we're really serious about this, we should do more. And so if you were to Google SAM, strength and mobility, so that's where we get the name SAM. And then now there's 5 levels to SAM. And the nice thing is it's just broken into easy days and hard days. And we don't, obviously we're not going to talk about any of the exercises, but what it is, it's just a bigger commitment. Now we're looking at, I'm going to commit 10 minutes on my easy days, and I might commit 15 on my hard days. And Claire, you and I both know that whether it's a half marathoner or a marathoner, we've really got to focus on that long run. There's just no way you're going to be a great marathoner without doing some type of long run.
Sure.
And then is the long run a hard day? Absolutely. And so now we're going to tack on more of this post-run stuff after the hard day. So bringing it all the way back to high school now, we would want to see, in my mind, 4 things. We'd want to see a dynamic warm-up, and we kind of skipped over the intelligent workouts. You do want to see threshold runs. I like progression runs more, but it doesn't matter. Some sort of workout that's aerobic. race pace workouts later in the year. But and then the strides, we want to see that there. And then we want to see some amount of post-run work. Now, there's the gold standard for all this stuff in certain high school programs. But I think if we said, from a straight training standpoint, what would we look for in a good coach? If we're doing static stretching, there's no strides, and then it's just get on the bus and go home, or get in the car and go home. Mm-hmm. And again, every parent's going to have to be delicate around this, but I do think it's fair to say, and Claire, it just comes down to this. If you're at Acme, if your son or daughter goes to Acme High School and they're getting their butt kicked by Jones High School, and then you're at the meet and you saw Jones High School doing the dynamic warm-up before their race, I mean, that's where the light bulb goes off. Like, why isn't my kid doing that stuff?
Right, right. It's a lot more than running that goes into running. Yeah.
And again, in 2024, it does. I mean, I've been blessed to do some reunions with guys I ran with in college. And again, running in the mid 90s, we ended up being pretty good college runners because we all played other sports in high school, and we were good athletes. So part of the reason, like my daughter, and I'll be totally candid because I know she's probably not going to listen to your podcast because she's a 16-year-old, but she's really struggling. She has a big aerobic engine. Her mom was an All-American in college, very good runner, very good genes. But she's never played other sports. So laterally she's really bad, right? Gotcha. She can move forward, backwards, right? In that plane of motion, in the sagittal plane. But in the frontal plane, folks, if you're listening, right, you think of like a shortstop going back and forth, getting a ball, or a basketball player. So I kind of left this out in the dynamic warm up and whatnot. We want to move in all three planes of motion. And that's why the lunge matrix has been helpful. But man, my daughter, she's 16. She doesn't want to do that. Now, obviously the things you guys do, like foam roll and whatnot, she needs to do the foam roller too. But we really need to strengthen that chassis. And it's funny, Claire, because part of why I got so focused on this post-run stuff when I was a college coach was realize, and I learned this from my friend and mentor, Mike Smith, is that kids didn't have the same background of athleticism because of video games, because of screens. So the type of athlete who's a high school freshman now in 2024 they never played kick the can. If we said what kick the can is, they would know. They'd be like, what is that? What are we talking about? Yeah. So obviously I could talk about training all day, but I just think that the other things with a high school coach, so we've talked about training. One of my favorite quotes is, and you would say this to a high school coach, but you can observe it as the parent, which is they don't care what you know till they know that you care. Mm-hmm. So I probably should have led with that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. I think that your point that kids are not as well-rounded as perhaps they were when, we only had to come home when the streetlights came on and we were running around the neighborhood and all of that stuff as Gen X kids. But your point about how multi-sport athletes tend to actually become better athletes, that's actually coming true. We're seeing some science out and some research out that says that that's true. So perhaps what you're trying to teach with dynamic warm-ups and strength training and all of this stuff is that we actually need to be more well-rounded athletes to be better specifically at running.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I keep coming back to Mike Smith. I need to call him after this to say hi. But he and I did a series of DVDs, and the title of the DVD was Building a Better Runner, and the subtitle was Building from the Ground Up. And it was that was the entire thing, is that, when your foot interacts the ground, how is the body moving? And if you're starting, and granted, we were working with college athletes then, but if we were working with somebody who had, I'm thinking of his most famous athlete, this guy, Christian Smith, who dove at the line to make the Olympic team in the 800. Christian was a high school football player, small town Kansas. So he'd play 8-man football Friday night and run cross country on Saturday. That's a totally different foundation of athleticism than my daughter would have, where, she basically has no athleticism, and she's not super coordinator. Like, she's not a great dancer. Whereas my younger daughter, she can put some of these things in this dynamic warm up. You guys might want to check out. They take some time to learn. And if you have we always think of it sports. Did I play high school soccer? No. If you have a background in dance, you'll actually do these things very well. But absolutely, I would always want to take a runner. Oh, and here's one interesting thing too, Claire, is I was talking with my daughters. She's the assistant cross country coach. She's the principal of her middle school. And we were talking about what a good athlete this woman is. She just turned 40, just qualified for Boston off of like 3 or 4 days a week of running. Like, she's just a good athlete, right?
Yeah.
And so you would rather take the athlete and make them into a runner than have a runner who's blowing off all the things to maintain being an athlete. Another way to think about it, whatever amount of athleticism you come to distance running with, whether it's a high school athlete or an adult, you want to maintain that. You're probably not going to grow it, right? The best example we would use with college athletes is we might have like a middle distance runner who's a basketball player and could dunk a basketball. He probably won't dunk after 4 years of college running the 800 and the mile, but we don't want him to be a horrible athlete who has only run.
Right. So my dance background helped me become a good runner. That's good to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's get into the lunge matrix. So I first learned about the lunge matrix as something that you would do as a warm up before your run. And now it's something that you don't tend to use as a warm up anymore. So if you could explain exactly what the lunge matrix is for people who've never heard of it before and how you use it now.
Yeah. So the lunge matrix, first of all my stuff is almost painfully simple. So there's going to be 5 lunges and it's going to be 10 total reps. So if you think about it, if you just did a front lunge, like you just took a lunge, that's going to be with, let's say, your left foot in front. That's 1. Do your right foot. That's 2. So you just do 10 reps. Technically, it's 5 on each leg. There's 5 different types of lunges. You can Google this. You just look up lunge matrix. It'll be the first thing to come up. And so it's a total of 50 lunges. And Claire, you've maybe seen this with some of your athletes too. I mean, sometimes 50 lunges, if you've never done it, you're better off doing something like 30 or 40, right? Mm-hmm. But it really does help you move in all 3 planes of motion. So there's a rotational lunge. There's some things you're doing that is, when we run forward, backwards, that's called the sagittal plane. And the idea is we want to do a little bit of warm up in the frontal plane and the transverse plane. So we just want to rotate. Now, I really think the leg swings take 90 seconds. Lunge matrix takes essentially 3.5 minutes. I would question any adult. I'm 49. Any adult over 35. I was 35 when I really started doing this stuff seriously. And if you don't have 5 minutes for your run, you're really not being honest about staying injury free as an adult. This is a non-negotiable 5 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. But Claire, now I really do think this 13-minute dynamic warm up. And as I'm saying this out loud and talking to more of an adult audience, for a high school athlete, the 13-minute warm-ups is what we do every day. We do it on race day. We do it in warm-ups. Maybe for the adult runner, it's, hey, I've got literally an hour on my lunch break. Fun aside here for a moment. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, not only having an hour on his lunch, he only had an hour, meaning the changing of clothes prior to the workout and the changing of clothes after happened in an hour. So if that's your life, let's just do leg swings, lunge matrix. Let's do your run, and let's just do 5 minutes of SAM, of the strength and mobility. But if you're saying, hey, I have to get in a 50-minute run, I'm not willing to do a 40-minute run. One thing is your heart rate gets elevated a little bit with this warm up. Okay. Mm-hmm. With the lunge matrix and the leg swings. So that's great. Now, if we did the dynamic warm up, now we can use the lunge matrix at the end of the run when your legs are a little tired, and we're going to do 50 lunges. That's a nice little introduction to general strength. And people think sometimes, man, I've read this research. I see it in magazines. I need to go to the weight room, I need to do a hex bar deadlift, which I love. Okay. Hex bar deadlifts are great. But people are so weak typically with just body weight work that the lunge matrix is really helpful for a lot of months, honestly. Right. And then this goes back to what I do with high school kids. Again, use somebody like my daughter who hasn't done other sports and last year ran some fast times as a freshman, but doesn't have a lot of, musculoskeletal strength. Doing 50 lunges is significant for her. And right. I think a lot of people listening to this would find that, okay, I maybe just here's the most basic. There's a video, it's leg swings. So that gets our hip mobility, gets us warmed up. You go for your run and you do your lunge matrix. And Claire, you do it immediately after your run because we keep heart rate elevated. So we're going to extend the aerobic stimulus a little bit, which is nice. But then there's all this stuff, all this research about concurrent training. So we're doing strengthening right after the endurance work. And I've left out the idea of extending the aerobic stimulus. But there's no reason for you to finish your run, check your phone, get a glass of water and water the plants and then go do the lunge matrix. So it's like, if you're going to do the lunge matrix, go immediately into it while your heart rate is still elevated. Yeah. And Claire, I don't have the science for that. This idea of, Jay, what peer-reviewed studies talk about extending the aerobic stimulus? But just trust me, it works. And you'll, if you're wearing a heart rate monitor, you'll see it. I mean, you'll see it on your Coros or your Garmin. Like when you go straight into the lunge matrix, wherever you're at, if you're at 128 beats a minute, it's like a zone 2 workout, you're not going to dip to 108.
Right. Now, what about strides then? Because I have strides. I usually have my athletes do strides after an easy run, but I let them get a drink of water.
No. And again, so the biggest part of what I do for a living and my income are these training systems. I have a training system for cross country and for track. In the summer, with global warming, it's really hot most places. Right. Mm-hmm. And so all these kids are doing the same thing, Claire. We're on the exact same page where, doing strides as part of the run. And now I actually have kids do strides and I like adults to do this too. I actually have them do them within the last 10 to 15 minutes of the run, just so that they get done. And if we want to go down that rabbit hole, we can. But remember, we said we're doing the post run work, the SAM, and we're always getting water in the summer. Let's take some time and get some water. The other thing, Claire, this is where the people we work with are different. Mm-hmm. Adults are busy, right? Like the subtitle of my book for marathon runners is The Right Training for Busy Adults with Hectic Lives. So think about it. The busy adult isn't going to hang out, but the high school kid, man, we got to be on them to take that quick drink of water and then go into the post-run work.
After a short break, I'll be back with more of my conversation with Jay Johnson. If you're a marathoner or half marathoner, now's the time to plan for success. Instead of relying on motivation or going at it alone, come join me and an amazing group of runners just like you on the PR team. It's a virtual running team and so much more. You'll get a custom training plan for all your running, strength, mobility, mental strength workouts, and more, all based on your fitness, goals, and lifestyle. You'll get all your questions answered by me and our super supportive team in a private online running community. And the coolest part is that you get access to an exclusive weekly private podcast just for the team. It's this sweet spot between just getting a DIY plan and full-on private coaching, even though you'll get lots of individual attention, all for a lot less than you might think. Team spots are limited, so sign up today at theplantedrunner.com/group. That's theplantedrunner.com/group. I don't know about you, but those heavy, ugly plastic jugs of laundry detergent make no sense to me. You're paying for mostly water, they take up a ton of room in your laundry room, and then you toss the huge plastic jug in the recycling. And did you know that 500 million of those bottles end up in landfills and oceans every single year? That's why I made the switch to Earth Breeze laundry sheets. They come in plastic-free packaging, take up almost no space, and you're not wasting your money paying for watery detergent. It's an easy way to get
clean clothes without all that plastic waste. Get 40% off with your subscription at earthbreeze.com/plantedrunner. That's earthbreeze.com/plantedrunner.
And we're back with my conversation with Jay Johnson. What are the other kind of differences about high school running versus adult running? I know that I do not coach anybody under 18. So this is kind of helpful to hear because I do sometimes get inquiries about it. I'm adults only. But a lot of parents will come to me asking for my advice for their daughter or their son, which I respectfully decline. But they usually ask, about training, about mileage, about, getting better, improving. Of course, these are the things we all want. But you can't just train a 15-year-old the way you can train a 35-year-old. So what are the biggest differences?
Yeah. What's so interesting? So I have a 16-year-old daughter and I have a daughter who's 12 who this recording will come out a little later. She'll be 13 by the time this comes out. So I'll have two teenagers. And obviously,
I'm right there with you. I got 13 and 15, so I know. 13
and 15, so we're in the same boat. So, and these are both girls, so let's be mindful of both development. I have a daughter who's menstruating and a daughter who's not, right? Mm-hmm. So, and let's just talk about high school girls for a moment because high school boys are easy. Let's start with it. It's really important that my 16-year-old daughter, in the new second edition of my book for high school kids, we're going to talk more about RED-S, right? Good. Relative energy deficiency in sport. Now, I talked about it in the first book, but I have a chapter where we're just talking about anemia and we're just talking about RED-S. So what's important for my daughter is that she's eating enough, right? Mm-hmm. Now, eating is a tricky one, right? Yes. I even found it, without going into too much detail, I even found it tricky as a college athlete. I wasn't as lean running 20 miles. I'd run 85 miles a week in singles. So we're talking 20 on Sunday, second run of 15, it was a lot. And I still wasn't as lean as teammates who ran 20 miles a week less. So I think talking about nutrition and fueling, what a great word. I think that's helpful for all of us to think about fuel. But for my daughter, I don't want her thinking about fuel. Like sometimes it's just how many calories am I getting? And if it's a burger and fries and a milkshake, do we want that 7 days a week? Absolutely not. But the amount of calories is really important for where she is, right? Now, volume, and then I use volume in terms of mileage, because as we've talked about, isn't it great if we could quantify how much of the post-run work we do, right? Mm-hmm. So Claire, the number one ranked boys team in the country is coached by Niwot High School. The number one ranked girls team is coached by Mountain Vista. I'm super close with both guys, and yet they're running much less volume than everybody assumes. Yet they're doing a ton of things like sprinting and hill sprints, and they're doing all this post-run work. So when we talk about volume, that's a better word because it encapsulates everything we're doing as a runner. Mm-hmm. Now, let's go back to my daughter, right? We established she's got a weak chassis. So we want her mileage to be low, and we want her volume to be higher, okay? With my middle school daughter, we just want it to be fun. And her coach, oh my God, we are so blessed as a family for Coach Doug. Coach Doug has a ton of meets on the schedule. Now, Claire, I totally screwed this up when the older daughter was on the team. I was like, this is too many meets. Because you and I know, like from,
Right. Don't race too often or you're never going to peak. Yeah.
But folks, let's think about it. For my daughter, who was 12 this entire cross country season, what's more fun, going and running a race or doing, let's do 4 by 800. And folks, the other thing too is like the workouts that make sense for you. I don't want to say something too extreme. For the most, okay. So like the name of the workout might make sense. So the term long run applies. But in my marathon training, we're going to get in 4 18-mile long runs, 2 20-mile runs, and ideally 1 22-mile run over 20 weeks. The longest long run, and my daughter ran a pretty legit time being really undertrained as a freshman. The longest I would want to see her run in high school is probably 10 miles. Now, if I had a boy, this is where it gets a little trickier. She's a sophomore. One of her close friends, Emery, is a boy who he can run 13, 14, maybe even sneak in a 15 or 16 mile long run in high school. But I would want my daughter doing more post run work. They both might have a 2-hour practice, but I would load up Avery more on the post run work and set her up in college. Oh, this is the key thing. I don't know why I didn't start with this. We're really looking at long-term development. So, for my 16-year-old daughter who has a mom who's an All-American in college, I look at her as 16, and then what can she be at 18 as a senior in high school? Can she be a woman at age 22 or 23 as a senior in college? And then might she, if she, let's say she was good enough to run at the Olympic trials in the 10K. Well, now we're looking at a 29 or a 30-year-old woman. And then let's say she runs the marathon. Now we're looking at a 33-year-old woman. So really, let's just say she was going to run until she was 32. That's 16 years from now for a 16-year-old. And going back to what makes a great high school coach, it is absolutely unacceptable if the high school coach is only looking at the next, just looking at the high school career and quote, we'll use the old school term, Claire. We'll just talk about if the high school coach is running them into the ground and then, they quote, don't have enough left in the tank for college. Those words and terms are totally appropriate.
Yeah.
So anyway,
but we're also, when you throw out those mileage numbers, 10 miles or 15 miles for a boy, we're talking about long distance runners, middle distance runners. We're not talking about 800-meter runners, right? Just to be clear, we don't. Sprinters are not running 10 miles.
No, yeah, and I'll be clear. I don't think my daughter should run, honestly, this year ever more than an hour. And these kids run pretty slow. So she'll never, she ran 6 miles or 7 miles once as a freshman, but she ran, 5:16 or 5:14 for 1,600. So, but most kids run more. I think in my training systems for a kid who's going to run the 800 and the 1,600, they might never do a run that's longer than 35 minutes.
Okay.
And because they're running slower than 7-minute pace, they won't even run 5 miles.
Right.
So, I gave the upper limits of a senior in high school. And your question too is like, how do we, my middle school daughter, let's say she was going to build up to a 10-mile run her senior year. As a freshman in high school, she might not run longer than 5 miles for her long run. And then most days she might run 3 miles, which is the distance that she'll race at. That's one of the crazy things that when people first see my training, they're like, oh my gosh, if we're going to get ready for 5K, we've got to do 5 miles of, if the race is 3 miles long, every workout day's got to be 5 miles. But folks, if you do the 13-minute dynamic warm-up and on the back end, you do 10 to 15 minutes of post-run work, then in the middle is that 25-minute run with strides in the last 10 minutes. The entire aerobic stimulus now, it's 13 plus 25. So now we're at 38. Let's say it's 12 minutes to make the math easy. We've got a 50-minute aerobic stimulus. So now if the kid was running 8-minute pace, well, let's say 8:30 pace, there's still, it's the same aerobic stimulus as a 5-mile run. And one thing I kind of left out is this dynamic warm up is your heart rate is elevated right away. So you'll just have to watch the video on YouTube to see it.
Sure. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah. But folks, you just have to understand that volume for your son or daughter, if they're in middle school or high school, is the last thing you should focus on. And the other one too is people focus on the weight room when these kids don't even have, they can't even move their body weight well. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So let's not load up the spine and doing some back squat at body weight.
Right. And their frequency is kind of weird too, as far as what an adult would do, because they're obviously running Monday through Friday. Right. And some of them run on the weekends, some of them don't. It's not a very well spread out. It's not like they're running 2 days resting. It's they have this intense block, and then, most kids take the weekends off unless they are really, the top end. So their frequency is a little weird. I gotta say.
I'm so blessed that coaches are winning state championships in cross country with my training systems, and kids are running, huge. I mean, our individual state champions in track with it. None of them will run 6 days or 7 days a week.
Good.
So folks, I mean, your kids, if they ran 28 days in a row, I would say the coach is doing a bad job. The most you would ever see a high school athlete do, I think, is 13 out of 14 days. And I've worked with
that's still a lot. That's still that's top
and
tier.
I would never see that. So my daughter as a freshman last year didn't run Saturday or Sunday every weekend unless she had a race on Saturday. So she was a 5-day-a-week runner. She was probably 5 days on a week. Yeah. If they didn't have a meet, it's Monday through Friday. And then they often had Saturday meets. So now we're looking at 6, but then we go back to 5 and then 6. So, and people who really know the sport would be like, well, she ran 5:14. She's pretty talented, but the same thing holds true for an athlete with less talent who's going to run 5:40. Because remember, we talked about long-term development, and the best thing for these freshman girls and boys is to be really patient with, just like you said, frequency and also volume. I'll be honest, this gets a little nuanced. I do think boys, if running is their favorite thing, and that's all that, like the website all these kids are on is called Mile Split, that has all the articles and the stats and whatnot. I would let a boy, so Emery's sophomore teammate, this winter after cross country, so winter of sophomore year, I'd kind of cut him loose and say, hey, if you're willing to do all the post run stuff, if you're willing to foam run, really take care of yourself, we can let you go a little bit in terms of more volume. And this is a kid, by the way, who will never be a good miler, and he'll never run a 3,200 probably as well as he'll run cross country. So we're talking about this, and he's somebody who, when he's in his 20s, will run a great marathon. And that's actually not the average kid. I would rather have, I shouldn't say rather, you always want to make room for the kid who plays basketball in the winter and then can be on your 4x8 relay and on your 4x4 and run the mile. That kid, the volume can be super low.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually my next question is, what should the kids be doing in the winter? Because a cross country season, we're in November now, cross country season is ending. And then we have a ways to go before outdoor track. Some places have indoor track, so it's shorter, but what should they be doing in the off season? Obviously, first choice, do another sport. But if there's no other sport, what should they be doing?
Yeah, it's. I love the idea of a dual sport or of a multi-sport athlete. I played basketball every year in high school. I'll push back a tiny bit on how competitive the state is. So, like in our state of Colorado, there's the girls running is so good in our state that there will be literally 0 girls at the state meet in any event from 800 on up who played another sport this winter. I'm not judging that, saying it's good or bad. It's just
they're
there's
just
no
way into it.
Yeah, I mean, girls are really like, we have this. It's us in California in terms of how good it is. Flip side is, I'm friends with a woman in Ohio. She's won 17 cross country state championships. She's the winningest coach in any sport in the state of Ohio. I have goosebumps telling you this. And Jessie, every one of her girls is going to do a winter sport, every single one. And they'll either swim or play basketball. So I think the question is, now we have the two extremes, and we have kids who, aren't in as competitive of a state. And I really think we have to look at intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. And if they could be running 3 or 4 days a week, and then maybe in your area going for a mountain bike or a hike, oh my gosh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But I think more often than not, you've got a girl in suburban Chicago, super cold, and she sort of loved cross country. She's not as fired up about track. The worst thing the coach and the parents can do is say, you have to train 6 days a week, just like you did in cross country. I mean, and this has been hard for me as a parent too. Like, my daughter isn't as committed. She's had injuries about half the season, and she's not committed to doing the post run work and the foam rolling the way I would have been in high school. But that's not my journey to be on. That's not my life to to live. And I think parents and coaches can make a huge mistake. And again, when the weather's cold, if you had an unmotivated athlete who's being told they have to do a long run in January, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
That kid's going to be out of the sport. Folks, remember, we need lifelong runners. We need the high school experience to plant the seed. Oh, perfect for the podcast. To plant the seed for being a lifelong athlete, a lifelong runner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, most of the people that I work with as adult runners didn't do this in high school. They weren't athletes in high school. They found it later for very different reasons than you would if you had been doing it the whole time. A lot of people I know that did it in high school don't do it anymore,
right,
for a lot of reasons. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that I don't know. I suppose that's something that all parents have to do with whatever we're talking about, piano lessons, gymnastics, track, whatever it is. If they want to do it, it's their journey, not ours, right?
Yeah. And another thing too is that, I think kids will figure it out. So, I mean, I hope people don't think, oh, he's throwing his daughter under the bus. She's not doing the post-run work. Well, she's really getting serious about it in the last literally 10 days because the state meet, didn't go as well. And there's these neat postseason races for Colorado. The kids travel to Arizona, super fun trip for them, but they run on a really fast course. And to a fault, these kids are so focused on time, but she wants to get the training in now to run a fast time. So. But Claire, I mean, this is where it could, become a parenting podcast, right? Like I definitely don't have the answers on, what's that beautiful line between encouragement and pushing.
Yeah.
And honestly, if anything, I maybe don't push enough, but man, it's because I've been in the sport so long. And at every I mean, the biggest run is when I was a college coach, and we'd get people that we recruited and they were just burnt out.
Yeah.
And it was hard to tell that during the recruiting process. And yeah, I could go on and on about that, but our sport is too hard. I just think we all understand what the term intrinsic motivation is. And I think if that's kind of your North Star in terms of what kids should be doing in the winter, if they're intrinsically motivated to do it, they can train. And if they're not, they're not. And Claire, one final tangent. I was a little bit anti-indoor track because that was how my college program was. Mm-hmm. But, if you have indoor track, but the kids haven't really trained much, just go let them race. Because racing's going to, I mean, this is extreme. If a kid ran once a week, but went every Saturday to an indoor meet for like 6 weeks in a row, that's great. I mean, they're going to have a lot more fun doing that.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter is in junior high and they have a meet every Thursday. Every Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I mean, at the end of the season now, and with the hurricane, we lost a lot, but, conferences this week. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting.
Yeah. So I would love to kind of wrap it up with some of your favorite success stories. It could be about high school kids or coaches that you've inspired, but anything that you feel like, you've really made a difference with your coaching or training.
Yeah. There's a woman in Iowa, Sarah, and she coaches boys, which first of all, I just love, right? Like we need more women in coaching. There's not it's 50-50 in terms of how many girls compete in high school cross country and how many boys. Like it's within 10,000. It's a half. It's 250,000 each. The number of women who coach high school is extremely low. The number of women in my training system, percentage wise, is really high. They're the best students, and it's this beautiful and a lot of them weren't runners as much. And so they're willing to just, in the same way as when I was coaching adult runners, they just wanted to be given a plan and then they'd follow it. I have a lot of successful stories with female coaches because they follow the plan, but then they ask a ton of questions. And I wouldn't say the training is complicated, but there are some complexities and there's a lot of layers to it. So there's a coach in Iowa, Sarah. She has so many questions, and it was great because the first year that I developed the system, it helped me really refine it. But man, her boys team is really good. She had a boy get 5th in the state. In Iowa, boys cross country, for as small as the population density is in that state, it's one of the top 10 states probably in the country. This kid's a national caliber runner, and that success story is awesome. I think on the other end, there's a male coach in Ohio who won the biggest classification. This guy had coached for probably 10 or 15 years, and he just went all in. So he sends me the email saying, we just won largest classification. And they beat a team who had won. Mason had won for probably 4 or 5 years in a row. And he's like, Jay, we just did what's in the track training system or cross country training system. I was like, come on, Scott, you had to change something. He's like, no. He's like, we did it exactly to the letter. And that was cool because it works really well at small schools. But sometimes I wonder, is that because the competition isn't as good? But that was really cool to see Scott and his boys, be able to use this approach to training. And as I think about it too, it's harder to get a boy to buy into, if we're nitpicky for a moment, the volume on the easy days is really low in terms of what they're going to put on their Strava. So like all the kids in the training system, their Strava looks like they're not running enough. But again, we talked about extending the aerobic stimulus. They're doing so much post-run work and they do that warm-up that they might have a aerobic stimulus that's 80 minutes long, but they only ran for 50 minutes and they're running 7:30 pace. So, maybe they ran 7 miles. But those would be 2 examples. And honestly, Claire, if I'm having a day where I'm not, just long day, works hard, whatever, I'm so blessed to make a living in running. I've always felt that way, but It's very cool to be able to coach a coach who then might coach 10 or 20 or 50 athletes.
Yes, the ripple effect. Absolutely.
Yes. So I'm really blessed that way.
All right. Well, I think that is a perfect place to wind things down. Before I let you go, Jay, tell everyone where they can connect with you. Yeah,
it's just Coach Jay Johnson. CoachJayJohnson.com, and it's all focused on high school athletes, and there's some useful articles for middle school athletes, and I will plug I have a book for high school athletes called Consistency is Key, but all that'll be, so you've got it.
I do.
You've got the book.
Thank you.
The second edition is coming out in the next 2 weeks, so that's exciting.
Fantastic. Jay, it's been a pleasure to finally get you on the show. Delighted to talk to you as always. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. Today's topic is get an A+ for being a B student. Many runners are attracted to the sport because we love achievement. We work hard and we get results. So naturally, we assume that if we work harder, run faster, run more often, that we'll get even better results. That can work for a while, but sooner than you think, the A+ mentality will backfire. Instead, aim to be a B student. Show up, do the work, but don't strive for excellence day in and day out. This will help prevent you from overreaching and overtraining. But on race day, that is when you bring out your A game. Thank you for listening to The Planted Runner, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Don't forget that you can win free access to one of my Sprint Session masterclasses just for writing an Apple Podcast review. So be sure to write yours right after your run today. Reviews are the #1 way to boost this show's reach, and it's a great way to tell me what you'd like to hear next because I read every single one. Have a great run today.
Sports stars. They're like superheroes.
But they're actually real.
Which is why we've made a podcast about them. You see,
They've all got a story.
But too many of these stories were cut short.
Kobe Bryant,
Payne Stewart,
Flojo,
Phil Hughes.
Justin Fashanu.
We're writing episodes about all of them.
And sadly, many more.
Death of a Sports Star, a new series from Crowd Network.